Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Manna in the Morning, presented by TITUS Camp. And my name is Logan Richardson. I am here in beautiful Rock Hill, South Carolina, and I love that we get to do this in this way through the method of YouTube, the internet, being able to share time with each other, especially as campers from all over so many different places. And a lot of you may not know me. Like I said, I'm living in South Carolina, and it's been a while since I've been at TITUS Camp. But I was a TITUS camper back in my high school days, so that would have been 2017, 2018, something like that. So I had a great time at TITUS Camp. Lots of really good friends that I met there. I'm thinking back on memories of ultimate frisbee. They used to play out there on the soccer field at Heritage Christian University, and then taking our lessons and working on them all week, and then taking them to Florence Boulevard, Church of Christ. One of the years that I did it there. It was the first time I'd really ever preached like a 180 degrees. It was really weird, but a really good congregation there. And actually, where I preach and I'm the associate minister at now is the Church of Christ at Gold Hill Road in Fort Mill, South Carolina. And we also have a 180 degree auditorium. So don't let anybody tell you that you don't get real world experience on things you're actually going to need to know. So I hope you've enjoyed TITUS Camp. I hope you're really close with all of your friends. But let's dig into our text for this morning. And I want you to turn in your Bibles to 2 Corinthians chapters 11 and 12. And I want us to notice something a really interesting facet of Paul's mind here. And the way that Paul goes about his ministry is very strong, right? He comes off very strong in his authority as an apostle of Jesus Christ, but also he has a balancing side to him as well that he talks about here in 2 Corinthians 11 and 12. He's going to start off talking about his sufferings, right? He's going to look in chapter 11, the second half of chapter 11, about all the things that he suffers and what makes him qualified as an apostle, but also as someone to be able to, as most people would, boast, right? The word boasting is really only a negative connotation for most of the ways that we would use it today. Boasting is not a positive thing, especially for when we look at passages like this and we see what Paul is going to encourage us. And what Paul's going to say is boasting in our works and even in our gifts and our talents, our abilities, our positions, or our authority, or whatever you want to look at in that realm, boasting is not worth it. So he's going to go on and talk about how he's a Hebrew of Hebrews. And that's a different passage. He talks about that phrasing. But he's a Hebrew. He's an Israelite, offspring of Abraham. Chapter 23, he said, I've had far greater labors than most people, most Christians. I've had far more imprisonments. I've had beatings. I've gone through encounters with death, almost death. Received the 40 lashes minus one, beaten with rods. All of these things that Paul has been through, a lot of people would take as reason to boast as what he has sacrificed for the gospel. But even deeper than those weaknesses, right? I look at those sometimes and I say, well, those would be fair enough things to boast in because it's through his persecution that the gospel has spread. But even beyond that, he says in verse 30, he says of 2 Corinthians 11, verse 30, if I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. And then he says in verse 1 of chapter 12, I must go on boasting. There's nothing to be gained by boasting, but I want to do it, and I want to tell you why. He's going to talk about some other things that he could boast in, but then if you skip down to chapter 12, verse 7, he says, to keep me from being conceited, because of the surpassing greatness of revelations, a thorn was given to me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from being conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. And then he says at the end of verse 10, when I am weak, then I'm strong. It's really easy for us to get, especially, I'm talking to you guys from TITUS Camp, right? You guys some of you have been doing this for a long time. You're coming from congregations, and you may be one of the only ones that's come from your congregation. You may be one of the only teenagers that you know of that is interested in full-time ministry at some point in your life. Or you may be one of the only ones in your congregation as a teen who's willing to teach a Bible class, right? And let's admit, those are pretty awesome gifts that you've been given by God. But again, Paul's saying that's not what he's boasting about. Those things are not worth giving our attention to. The power of Christ is not as evident, even in the gifts that we've been given, as the power of Christ is when we show our weaknesses. But why is that? I mean, what about our weaknesses gives Christ's power some room to grow? Well, one of the reasons is because when we show people that we are not perfect, and we can explain that just because we are Christians doesn't mean that we believe that we do everything right all the time, or that we're more worthy of God's love. When we show the weaknesses, it shows God's power, Christ's power more through us. And Paul says that kept him humble. And what I love about that is, again, for you guys with these great gifts that you've been given by God, as you go through and hone your skills, those are amazing things. But don't forget ever that humility, and Paul says to keep from being conceited, that is far greater power in the gospel than it would ever be to be a perfect preacher, to be a perfect Bible class teacher, or anything like that. Because Christ, when we are weak, makes us strong. That's why Philippians 4:13, Paul talks about being able to do all things, endure all things, because of Christ who makes him. It's not because of Paul's abilities. It's not because of his special talent or anything. It's because Christ sustains him, right? He's not an apostle because he's perfect, but it's because Christ has given him the grace of having that authority because of what Christ has given to him. It's never about us. And I think that's something for us to all remember, especially as we go out and teach Bible classes, preach to people, minister into the lives of so many others. Remember to stay humble. And it's not just a good self-help tip to remember to stay humble, but it's specifically for the power of Christ to rest upon us and for others to see Christ's power more clearly than we could ever do by explaining it or showing it ourselves through our own gifts. So let's remember that at the end of verse 10 of chapter 12, Paul says again, when I am weak, then I'm strong. Let's remember that. I hope we'll see you again tomorrow at 7:45 for Manna in the Morning, presented by TITUS Camp, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for tuning in to Manna in the Morning, presented by TITUS Camp.